I'm Katherine. This is Vinny. Our practice is Tonic Design, Tonic Construction. We're here today to talk to you about a personal interest. We are here to talk to you about multi-generational housing and research, interests, and projects that are really important to us in the context of our city and sort of housing options and how our city is growing. And we'll start off talking to you about our practice so you can see our own values and how we work and how it led to this research interest.
Right. We're an architecture firm and a construction company. And we believe in making and design, and how you make something informs the design. So it's not going forwards, it's going backwards for us.
So just briefly, there's in black and white, a traditional relationship between owner, architect, and contractor, and then our blended sort of way of working, where it's about owner, designer, and builder overlapping, but trying to understand the value of everyone involved in a project and maximize that value.
So basically, we do projects all over the Triangle and further out. We've done houses in Boston and
Richmond
and other places in the mountains. But in our place, we're basically hacking out of the earth and we're on site. And then we're in this great climate that's basically can be really hot and humid and really cold. So our buildings in our buildings in the Triangle in our region have to kind of do double duty. We're not just in Arizona and just have to worry about scorpions.
So we care about the site and context very much. This is a solar studies for one of our projects.
So the actual particular place on the on the site on the earth is really important to how it informs the actual architecture. So these are sun studies about how we can put solar panels on a building, and the building stretches away from its shadow.
This is our sort of a diagram of the way we work, design, building models in the office. Then we have someone kind of mock it up for us on site. So we are understanding that process before we even start construction. And then there you see this metal siding sort of implemented on site in the building.
Architecture is a collaboration, and if you don't engage actually who actually makes the projects, you're not really being a good architect, because that's how your really good architecture comes, is from making. So this is typically our office on any time. And then this could be our office at any time.
Trying to introduce our clients to as many of the sustainable technologies as possible, and understanding the site and how to sort of build better. This is an example of a LEED project, but then how these values and systems turn into this architecture.
But it's always about where people live and in their environment, and blending the indoors and outdoors. I'm a real big tool junkie, so anytime that we can engage new technology or tools and change the way we make things, I think our architecture is better. And then also understanding the rules of our place. We just got the UDO approved the other day, or last night, or 2 days ago, but understanding actually how your neighbors and how the comps and how the banks see your project, and how you have to be similar, but you can reinterpret those in a different way for architecture. And it can turn out like that.
So this slide's important to us because we're in the design office trying to understand how to adapt to a site, how to shade a building, drawing, processing, and then the same person who's working on that is then on site actually building it. And then it becomes a space like this that opens up to the site and responds to the sun.
So really we're always trying to discover the constraints of a project and work with them to kind of develop something our clients and we would never have started with. Projects downtown Raleigh as we develop, and there was this great symposium that's starting another dialogue about how we build in Raleigh and other places.
And this was last week at CAM, and Paul Goldberger is talking about how you design better, build better, and how it really influences a place.
Again, working backwards, since we're contractors and we do not build all of our projects, we build a few of our projects. but we're always managing lots of piles of money to give our clients options to figure out what their project's going to be. Building relatively quickly and to the highest standards that we can at that time with that project.
This is a project that we did at the North Carolina Museum of Art. For us, one of our more public projects, and it's a classroom, an outdoor classroom for learning and experiencing the Greenway and the site.
So you have a bunch of kids come on Saturday, and then there's these cubbies with art supplies and tables, and then they go out into the nature walk, and then they come back and draw art after being informed.
So people get married here, they do yoga here, they ask people to the prom here. This is important to us because it's really engaging our place and our city.
Right. In Raleigh, we found that it's really exciting, and I think our architecture is better when we find a project and don't tear it down. This is a house in Laurel Hills where a steel frame was built in the 1960s, and then we reworked it, repurposed it for the current clients.
And then again, not far from 5 Points, we found an old building, the roof was falling in, and we turned it into our office and then a live-work. We lived there and worked there. It was great. We had 3 summer interns from NC State, and over the course of 13 weeks, we got the project permitted, and they managed the construction, and we had a new office. So we felt, we maintained most of the existing structure, but just began to reuse it and celebrated old and new in this offset of the existing brick building with this new clear story and new roof.
Then we had too many kids. Here's another building you're probably familiar with, the Audio Buys building, which used to be the old dry cleaner in 5 Points. And this building had been left to kind of a tough state, and the owners asked us to kind of re-envision the skin, and more importantly, you can see they had shades and insulated panels trying to keep the heat out.
So this is 12 tons of air conditioning that could not keep the building below 85 degrees in the summer. And really just by replacing the skin and understanding its place and the response to the sun, you can be in the building and it's 70 degrees and comfortable in the summer now with no mechanical system changes. And also giving it new life in a very significant, intersection of our city.
Here's another project in Cameron Park, right off Hillsborough Street, where our clients and comps and things like that with the bank, they bought this house, but we didn't change any of the footings, and we just worked with the existing structure as much as possible.
So we used the exact same footprint in the first floor framing. Everything that was demoed was third-party verified and recycled, and then we just extruded up.
Right, and the owners really they were on the edge about buying this house, but when we said that we can actually lower the public space to the garden, they really sort of said, let's buy the project. And it was really the existing condition of actually coming in from the street, but then dropping into the garden, that sort of spot, we would never have come up with like, hey, you have to do this kind of stair and this 14-foot kitchen, but actually the project grew out of those constraints. Here's our #1 job site helper. But also, like in that particular street, maintaining the edge, overhangs, front porch, open, the way the owners wanted to be, but still maintaining patterns of neighborhood. We also teach at NC State and at Syracuse University. This is a studio, the 5th-year studio, where we draw and figure out how to actually make buildings in their final semester. I co-taught it, and our project was actually, you guys probably all know this building, which is the Kmart on Western Boulevard. And so the whole studio was to kind of, how can we re-envision this property? And so they did precedent studies where we looked at projects, far away and near, where their density was much higher than ours, 41 units per acre. This is probably about 600 people in this spot, where it's really this crazy, interesting design about public space and sharing. It has penthouses, it has apartments, it has townhomes, and it has retail. But the really interesting thing is that it fits right on top of Kmart here in Raleigh. So I think as we kind of went through different projects, we realized that many projects could happen in our place. And in our place, we have lots of land. And as the city develops, as all these people move to the area, properties like this are going to be kind of re-envisioned.
So this was kind of one step into understanding housing density, how we could come up with new housing types, and which began to lead into this research of the multi-generational house. So it comes from this, passion for architecture and understanding different ways of living, but also our personal interest of understanding how to coexist, taking care of our kids and being with our parents.
So I think here there's so much things happening in publications, but if you look at this center slide, this is the Waltons, that TV show back in the day, and where everybody through this depression lived together and shared. And the TV show to us kind of spun it in a negative way. Why, we have to live together because we don't have money. But there's lots of things currently happening where the percentages of multi-generational homes are actually on the uptick, especially given the recent recession we had.
And I think, yes, given the recent recession, but also that people are living longer, and that there are new terms such as the sandwich generation or the boomerang kids, where people are coming back to live at home, or you're in a position where you need to take care of your children and your parents. And so we were trying to understand what the architectural implications of this are, and how that could kind of, make living together even better and capitalize on the benefits of multiple generations sharing responsibilities, sharing costs, and learning from each other.
Right. This graph here is probably really hard to read, but what it represents is that generations used to live together, and there were very few older people that were on their own. And as time has gone on, many older people are by themselves. And so I think this is a trend that's going to shift, or is shifting.
So we kind of processed what happened through history, and looked at living together at times where it was basically the norm: the Chinese courtyard house, Roman housing typologies, Native Americans, looking at the medieval sort of houses that also mixed in commercial. And then influences of the Industrial Revolution, and then the notion of then moving back out of the city and the Garden City. I think the most significant sort of shift in our ideas about living together and being acceptable to live together was after World War II, when everyone was coming back and there was just this mass production of housing, the American dream, the automobile, living in your own house on your own plot of land. And Levittown is probably one of the prime examples of this. And then I think this sort of continued, especially in American culture, of how you're sort of living that dream, and you're living correctly if you can have these things. So once the recent recession came, people started to challenge this. And we noticed when we were doing our research that many now spec home kind of developers are not only marketing spec houses, but are marketing things such as the next gen house, or trying to understand, they're capitalizing on this shift of people knowing that they'll want to live with their children and parents. So this was a recent New York Times article about a family in Queens, where it was a more urban example of this, but sort of the overlaps of the younger and older generations in comparison, again, to the Waltons. So the blue kind of on that side of the screen talks about, this is how they're marketing this typology. You can save money, you share your mortgage, you can share healthcare, you can share cars, it's flexibility. Actually, your home will be more marketable. And really what shows up in plan, we've kind of diagrammed some of it, but it's this blue space that is an integrated, I guess, mother-in-law suite in quotation marks of a typical type. But really, there's nothing about the architecture that changes. It still looks like a traditional house. And the diagram, the black and white, it's really a traditional house, and within it is this dotted line of a new kind of suite. Maybe there's a kitchen, but you're basically still separated by a 2x4 wall, and there's no sort of re-questioning of spatial adjacencies. And then what we're saying next to that is, how can you re-envision this? So the components, we challenge these relationships. So this led to our next studio, where we taught in Syracuse, and introduced our students, had them do precedent research, understanding where this exists in other countries and other cultures presently, not historical examples. And this project's really important to us because it's in Toronto, and a family built, I guess it's 4-story kind of unit, and understanding it's integrated multiple generations living together. And the important thing is that they said they all bought in early for a long-term kind of vision for this project. So over time, it's not only about architecture or space, but it's about generations moving through the house, and it's about the economic savings and benefits. And then there are things that, as we mentioned before, we cannot sort of quantify or qualify in a diagram, and those are the intangible benefits of living together.
Yeah, another type that you're probably familiar with is the New Orleans townhome, and how there's public on the street, the family lives above, and then the kitchen or another generation lives behind. And so if you think about, if you make your projects built really well and they last because you're building it for several generations, the net worth for your family actually significantly changes, for the next couple generations. And so it's just interesting how you can invest now, and it'll change things later.
And go ahead.
No, other cultures naturally do this. So this is in Japan, where typically the parents have bought the land or have had land throughout, raising their kids, and that they'll chip in the land. The kids will build the project, and then they'll all kind of live together. So the parents, the kids, and so there's lots of doubling up in other cultures.
And therefore the architecture changes to respond to that. I'd say through our research we probably found the most examples in Japan, and we'll show you some of those. But it's not only parents and their children and their grandchildren. Sometimes it's brothers and sisters living together. This is a house for 2 sisters that decided to live together.
Yep. This is 3 sisters.
And just understanding the house and the relationship between the house and the outdoor space and the shared spaces.
This is in the Netherlands, and basically two families wanted to live next to this great park, and so they came up with these designs of how can we share space and share view. And so again, like these multiples, you can see this as like a duplex in Raleigh. That would work, but it's really an interesting architectural solution.
And so then we took this research back to our place and tried to understand the implications here in our city. So we had our students investigate multiple sites of different zoning types and different densities. And this is from one of our sites, but what we realized is what's happening is houses this is a quadplex, and instead of sort of making neighborhoods more dense, they're then the land is divided, and we're building large single-family homes.
Not totally against it, but there's a lack of you either build a single family house or you move into an apartment building. And so what we're saying is that we think that there's different plan types that can be explored.
Mm-hmm.
So we basically said from downtown Raleigh to about 3 miles out. The worst case would be, 5 miles out. Is look at potential different sites and zonings, because as we know, downtown's growing, and the suburbs will always be there. It's the space between that's actually going to densify in different ways. So it's either going to be in single families, or what we're proposing is sort of like multiples.
But we did find that it's not, unless you find a lot where it exists to be a duplex or a quadplex, it's hard to kind of make this multiple unit work. So we found that adding on to buildings or, changing them, you can kind of morph things to make it work. But
so one type is actually you're buying a house in a neighborhood, and you add on in some way. Another type is actually, you see this a lot. Surprisingly, you see this a lot very closer to the city than you would think. It's between Whole Foods and actually Cameron Village. You see many of these. So a lot of people back in the 60s built a unit where there could be 2 or 4 together. Some of these are at some really nice sites. Larger lots, now that with zoning's changed, that you can re-envision the actual density. Larger, again, another large lot in Mordecai, the one in Laurel Hills. Building downtown, and then, building multiples in dense, restricted sites. And, it always comes down to parking. So in some of these, if you're in certain zones, you don't have parking restrictions, and some you do. So it's pretty complicated at times. But the idea is that you would, our passion really is to find something where we could graft onto, or stack on top of each other, or wrap, or sort of these operations where you're using something that's there and re-envisioning the plan. I will say that if we have every one of these has an orange space, and that really represents that this could be one unit, this could be a unit, and then to really make this work, you need the shared common space. And back to Katherine's diagram, where spec builders are actually putting the suite into the house, you really need separation and privacy for it to work. And so we believe that one unit, 2 units, 3 units, they're all connecting to a shared common space. And it's the space between, so they can have a kitchen and privacy, and then kitchen and privacy and live independently, or choose to go into a space where everybody's together. So that's the real trick.
And then this flexibility of the house can be occupied by multiple generations. In cases where the zoning would allow, you could actually rent it out and make income for the family, or you can live there as multiple generations. So diagrammatically kind of showing how the house morphs with users over time, and also looking at how you build something so that it lasts and that it can be used for many years.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing in the building code where this could be seen as independent units, but this doesn't have to. This all could be one single family house with 4 kitchens. The building code doesn't say how many kitchens you're limited to. So it's kind of a nice little thing to work with. So here is the flex space, the shared common space where we have a kitchen, we have a big place to eat, we all sort of hang out and watch the Super Bowl or whatever it is, but you're connected to a garden. So it's really you have your space, we have our space, but we all come together in a space.
So this is that quadplex lot, and we did some quick studies there on our own and with our students, and some of the projects kept the existing shell and kind of reused it, but we looked back at those operations and how you could add on to it and re-envision it for a shared family space.
And again, here's that special space, the flex space that everybody comes to, or you could choose to have your own space, like if you're in the Hudson downtown.
And this is another project that we looked a little bit more in depth, and we kept the existing house and then tried to understand how you could add on here and still have a connected house, because this lot would not allow for it to be a duplex. And it's a tight lot, it's constrained, it's a long lot, and really you have to understand how to be able to park multiple cars on it. But how do you keep the existing add-on and generate and create a new space, and then have this flex space, shared space also integrated?
Again, the building code would see this as one single family house, but because of hallways, because of a stair that raises it, there's these kind of like zones and thresholds that are thickened to create privacy in several units.
So really understanding what those, instead of just inserting a unit inside of a house, which we keep kind of referring back to, minor things you can do architecturally and spatially and indoor-outdoor relationships that actually really do allow people to live very close to each other but have their own private spaces.
So again, that's the existing house, the front door, stairs that goes up to the upstairs unit, and they have a kitchen, dining, living with a balcony this way. So this unit looks out to a raised landscape, and the existing house looks to the backyard landscape. But then they share on the main level this place where they can come together and grill out. And the diagrams. So
we sort of wanted to ground this in more. There's a book called The Pattern Language, which many people refer to, about patterns in our lives that transcend just architecture, but are ways of understanding our cities and places. And so there are many patterns in here about, overlapping generations, household life, the family, being able to have your own spaces, but then also come together. And then ideas about separation and what becomes comfortable for people living together and occupying the same space.
And the hard thing to put a value on or put it into a spec or a comp is really how multiple generations share times together and stories and learn from each other.
And then again, how you can use this house over time and how it can adapt, but also how you can, as you get older, stay in your house and feel comfortable. So these are ideas about accessibility, but also about having family around you to take care of you and to interact with.
So somewhere between 100 and 200 years from now, your family is always coming and going, but the house stays within the group. Again, 4 houses could be actually less square footage if it's one. Instead of all 4 of us paying a mortgage, we all share a slightly smaller mortgage. If we all have independent houses with 2 cars, we can probably get away with 3. Instead of cooking more food each night that we try to say we're going to use again another night, we all share and cook less. We share utility bills. We only have 1 cable bill. So there's multiple ways to see it as like, tangible things, but again, like what we're saying is like, it's the interrelationships of being together. So in Raleigh, as downtown grows and so many people come to our area, we're interested in these kind of like this in-between zone where people want the ability to go downtown and have dinner at Garland, or drive out to the museum, or you have Rex, the hospital, or the university with like lectures. So it's really valuable to be in this place, but if it all goes to single family homes, it's going to be very difficult. So the idea of sharing means that we can actually do more things together for less.
Right, and just understanding this idea of an incremental urbanism where we're not inserting intense density into a neighborhood, but how you can incrementally make things, allow people to live together, to sort of have these shared benefits. And also, in general, questioning housing types in our city and different options and how we allow older generations and younger generations to live together. I think that beyond sort of what a house cost or the amount of square footage, there are a lot of other values that we really need to consider in order to have a well-functioning city in place that people want to be in. So
That's what we got.
thank you.
Sorry you couldn't hear well. Good job. We'd like to open the floor for questions. Yes.
How was this received by your students, the kind of millennial generation?
Yeah, that's a big
I have 2 millennials as kids, and I would love to live with them, but I'm the last person they want.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for the Syracuse studio it was really interesting because sometimes in architecture school you get a project where everyone has the same sort of program or, design, a certain building type, but they took it really seriously. And
Very personal.
Yeah, and some people decided they would live with their brother. Some people decided that they would live with their grandmother and had to have a school component because she was a teacher in Africa. There's a lot of different levels to it, but I think they really embraced it. And it was because it was not just designing a house, it was reconsidering what house is. And so it challenged them to think about spatial overlaps and different things. So,
But you're asking about millennials and their receptiveness to the idea, not necessarily architecture students, to the project.
Well,
But
Yeah.
have you gotten any kind of idea of how the market would respond to this kind of thing?
We've actually had several people come to our office trying to do this.
yeah.
And
Most of our clients now do ask for a component where their parents can come stay or their children could come back to.
We have
And
a
so-
lot of European clients where their family will come for a month, and so they're trying to figure out how can the house support that, but not like be intrusive. And so I think that, and then also there's some families that came to us where they knew that there wasn't going to be a lot of money at this generation, and we need help with that generation. And it's like, how can we kind of make that work together? And really, again, like it's not multifamily where go from apartment door to apartment door. It's really that thickened threshold that is exciting as a plan type to help make this work. Yeah.
Two things. One statement. I work with the refugee resettlement program for Catholic churches here in Raleigh. We found that those who the mountain yards that fled Vietnam already do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Together, that both of the families. I've helped with my homes and 11 people.
Yeah.
But the question I have, because we ran into it, is do you run into a parking problem?
Sure.
Because to me, that would be the big problem, putting multiple families, you have multiple bathrooms, multiple kitchens and everything. So
Yeah.
the land is not perfect for what we're trying to do.
Right. Our particular area has been worrying about like the space between downtown and probably not the perkable sites, is where you have city infrastructure to handle that. We're surprised that you could put as many kitchens as you wanted into a house, and we thought that really kind of opened up the idea.
There wasn't really. I mean,
You could
there
do
are
that
houses
now.
here that have many bathrooms for just 4 or 5 people who live in a house. So I don't think we didn't really kind of get into. I think what happens when you design this type of house is people agree that they need less space than if they just had their own house. So you might get away with a smaller kitchen or less bathrooms because you have this shared space, or you have a space where people can come stay with you, and so.
Yeah.
With
Yeah,
the
that would be-
septic, yeah, definitely. Yep.
Because then you get this huge area that you can't afford to justify the project. So, yeah, that's a trick. But I think like for us again, finding buildings that exist with that are already separated by unit, or like could be expanded or morphed or grafted onto, there's like a nice zone to kind of try to figure out. Because again, it's like what 16% of the population is already living in multiple units like that, and it's going up. Yeah.
I was a little late, I'm sorry. Do you have a pattern of square foot per person living space?
you know, in the architecture and style, if you will, of modernism, you can get away with less square footage because where you conceive the windows and place them makes the space feel different. So I'm going to try to do this, but if you have a room and at one end you have a door and one end you have a window, it feels a certain way. But if you come in at the corner and you dissolve the corner with a window, the hypotenuse, going back to geometry, is the longer length and it feels more gracious. And so really it's about it's not so much square footage, it's about actually surface of glass you can afford to put this in, to make it feel comfortable. And ceiling height's very important too. And sometimes too much ceiling height is bad. You know, getting a nice niche where you're around a fire reading a book, and then you go into more of a public space with many people. It's sort of like that's important. But you know, if you just go to single family houses, the amount of square footage per person from the 1950s to now is like, it's gone up so much. And so like, and that really is a factor of, you know, you got to get a bank loan, and the banks are going to give you more money if you have more square footage because they look at that spreadsheet and it seems more valuable.
Well, and that was my question, are you, surely we've reached the top now and we're going to start back down
Yeah.
from the mansions of
Sure.
10 years ago.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming what you're proposing is in, a lot of these are in the 3,000 or less square footage?
Yeah, right around 3,000 probably, you know, depending on how many people. But yeah, the houses that you would see, like as you described, you could put a lot of people in there. And if you do it in a certain way where you're careful and thoughtful about where you place your windows and how you relate to the site, you know, having a courtyard right outside a small room makes that room feel so large. And so there's those planning strategies that you can kind of implement. Yeah.
You mentioned a couple of times about durability or longevity of the structure. So what's happening along those lines?
Yeah.
You know, it's funny because upfront cost is always more. You know, we're seeing in our city, even downtown, we're building, you know,
wood and paint.
Wood and 5 stories out of wood, and we begin to say like what is the longevity of that? Most single family homes are wood frame construction. We've done houses, designed houses with steel and concrete and you know, other materials. So we're starting to get into that because it's really an upfront cost versus a long-term sort of savings. But I would say that the way you build, even, you know, if you take these steps to kind of be sustainable and really understand water and site and, you know, how things age, it does help the longevity of a building.
You know, the first couple tries in New Orleans, where they had these wood structures next to each other in a dense environment, they all burned. And so like over time they figured out, actually after 2 fires, they started building with like cement and stone. And those buildings are now like 200 years old. And so like, I think it's important for us to present options, but really emphasize that if you build well with maintenance in mind, that your building's gonna last. There's lots of studies that Patrick Rand, an architecture professor at NC State, he's graphed and documented all the buildings that last versus the buildings we're building, and the ones you put the most money up front last the longest, whereas the ones you put the least amount of money up front, you actually spend more over that same period of time. So it's a hard decision for everybody to make, and you've got to make that individually. But we would prefer to, you know, build in metals that were what they were in the patina, and then stones and brick where a wall would last, versus, you know, fiber cement panels and paint. Yeah.
I was thinking that the private entrance is a really big feature
Mm-hmm.
of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And the public space allows you to come into common and then split up. But the whole thing with private entrance and staircases, that's going to take up a lot of your usable space, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's true because, you know, circulation and stairs are things that you need in a house, but you don't use all the time. So, but we were on the one project with the existing orange house, we were trying to kind of have an entry point where you split off and then just had one staircase. So try and kind of keep things together and be efficient with those things. But yes, it does generate a little bit more square footage, but I think it's really important for allowing people to feel comfortable, living together.
Since we have the construction company, we're more concerned with like surface square footage than actually floor plan square footage, because it's the surface that creates the footings, that creates the wall, that creates the windows, and so we would typically spend, we would give more space to those things, but we would be more careful about windows and what we're building around. And again, like the banks will like it if it's bigger, so we've got to think about that. But how long do you want to pay that off? Yes.
So have you looked at the UDO at all in terms of like
Constantly.
co-housing or any kind of options that it allows? Because if it wasn't a family, like how it might, how ownership might play into it, if it was
Right.
local families or if it was unrelated people, and what kind of, how does UDO accommodate that?
Yeah.
I mean, I think we still need to sort of understand and investigate that a little bit more. I personally was hoping that there might be a little more opportunities for that incremental, like duplex. I thought the square footages of land requirement kind of went down a little, but there are other constraints. So I think that there are probably places, but it's more of on a lot of the zoning in the residential areas has, to my knowledge, kind of stayed fairly similar. But what would be nice is to have a family and then you could rent out one side to kind of share costs in that way, even if they're not related. And then when they have children and they want to come back, you've kind of set that up. If it's, then otherwise it kind of goes into some condo ownership and then it changes.
But I will say that even we say multi-generational, but it could be like multiple people sharing space. It doesn't have to be family oriented, just the way we charged it this time. But even with multiple families, you're going to want a really good kind of co-op contract and figure out how we're going to split this up and like monthly payments and things like that.
They're doing it in Portland, a lot of places.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and even, the conversation here about the accessory dwelling unit, that's very related. That's another way of sort of creating some density and allowing maybe, people in college who want to live in a neighborhood but can't afford a house, and they help that family who lives there pay. So I know that has come up. That's, an important topic in our city as well. So that's a component of this concept.
But you got to work within the rules, and so that accessory dwelling unit, we saw a project where it was built that way, but they were connected by a basement, so they're technically the same house with an accessory how they'll use it versus how it's permitted. So I think you've got to, until the code totally changes, there's a little flexibility still. Yes.
I'd be curious in any stories about accessibility. There was a group in Atlanta many years ago called Concrete Change, and they proposed that every structure in which you live would have one at-grade entrance and a wide enough bathroom that you could get in. If you did those two things, you could accommodate people over a much longer stretch of their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I twist my ankle often on the basketball court, and a larger bathroom, and that serves every generation. So I think like having like
Are you getting any demand, or have you come up with
every time. Every time.
We're building a house right now for a couple, and their intention is to just stay there. So everything is accessible, but it doesn't really stand out. It's sort of integrated. So there's minor spatial adjustments, and it's not that difficult. You just have to kind of think through it.
The more interesting challenge is actually that the bathroom's easy. It's actually getting the garage floor to be the same level as the house. And that's easily done, but it's like you can't forget that one, because you get the bathroom right, but still if you have a step, you miss the point. All right? Good? All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for coming.